So you know when you're shopping online for something and you end up finding what you need, but then you just get the idea to look for some other stuff that you've been wanting for a while and then end up purchasing that as well? Well, that's what happened to me recently when I purchased this official Nintendo GameCube keyboard controller that we explored recently in this video. Because in addition to this, I also purchased an original Nintendo Famicom and a Super Famicom for around $20 each. And at that price, it was a no-brainer. Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. So I've been wanting to get a Famicom and a Super Famicom in my console collection for a while. I have the North American counterparts to both of these consoles, but I've always been fascinated with the Japanese ones. And well, now I've got both of them. And not only that, I've got the original box for both of them as well, and I believe everything that came included with them. Yeah, I was really lucky to find these, especially at the price that the seller was asking. And the shipping charge, you know, obviously shipping from Japan to the US is expensive, but it wasn't that bad considering that I combined these packages with the Nintendo GameCube controller and, well, a few other things that you'll probably see in some future videos. In addition to these two consoles, I bought one game for each of them, so we've got Yoshi's Island here for the Super Famicom, and we have the Famicom version of Tetris in the box as well. I've been wanting this for a while too, and these were both relatively affordable. These were like under $10 each, so yeah, pretty awesome there. So let's go ahead and just open up. We'll start with the Famicom, so we'll set the Super Famicom aside for now. And yeah, the seller wrapped it in this nice you know, saran wrap packaging material, so we'll just go ahead and find the edge here and tear it open. And we'll start unboxing this, and this is going to be really cool because, I mean, like I said, I've been wanting one of these consoles for a while. So right off the bat, the first thing I noticed when I got both of these is just the way that the packaging is, because they've got this like top piece just over a thing of styrofoam. So they've got a bit of a different packaging style going on. Not that you guys probably really care about that, but let's go ahead and open it up. And here we go. Oh my gosh, this is awesome. So here looks like we've got the instruction manual. So we can flip through this here. Of course, the entire thing is in Japanese, which I don't understand. And here it tells you how to wire the RF connector to actually hook it up to your TV. Which, yeah, we're going to have to do that, or I'm gonna have to get a. Well, actually no, because the TV I've got over here has a coax input on the back, so we could hook it up that way. But yeah, right here, we've got Family Basic. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm gonna be honest, I've not read much into Family Basic, but this is a basic interpreter for the Famicom. So you could do some programming. You've got this keyboard accessory, which is super freaking cool. And you've got some info on the inside, a little bit of a tutorial in some of this as well. And on the back, you've got a diagram of the keyboard, got some sprites, and yeah. Definitely something neat that I might have to look into more sometime. But yeah, so here is the console itself. We'll go ahead and take it out of the box. It's just neat to see the, you know, how it differs from the North American counterpart with the controllers having these little docks on the side that you just dock into. They're also hardwired to the console, if you didn't know that, so they're not, you know, removable. On the back here, you've got your ports and sliders for changing like channel 1 and 2, TV and game, AC adapter and RF switch, and here's the port on the front for connecting things like the Family Basic keyboard, if I can grab the little pamphlet there. So yeah, we'll set that aside and we'll definitely come back to the console. One thing I don't think the power adapter is in here. I'm kind of looking at that, unless it's under here. Yeah, I don't think the power adapter is in here because this is the connector for, or at least part of the connector for the RF switch. And this right here is, oh yeah, it's just two of them. Look at that. So we've got two of these RF switches in here. Yeah, that's definitely a problem because I don't have an adapter. Well, we'll have to see. Maybe I've got something that that can work with this. I do have an NES power adapter, but, and this is very important if you ever get one of these, don't plug an American NES power adapter into a Famicom because it outputs AC instead of DC, and it will fry one of these things. It will damage it. Don't do it. It's a bad idea. Anyways, let's go ahead and see what else we have in here. It looks like we have, well, this right here looks like the same thing here. Is this like another one of these? I think it is. Or no, this is different. Okay, let's see. You got a 2 there instead of a 4. Is this like a different revision? It is a different revision. Look at that. This is revision 2. This is revision 4. So this is a newer version of the of the manual. This one is in much better shape too. This one you see has got some creases and stuff all over it. And right here we have a manga. Check this out. So yeah, this is a little bit of a promotional thing, I guess, for the Famicom. Of course, it's all in Japanese. Yeah, that's definitely a neat thing to have. And right here, we've got one last thing. This looks like it's oh, it's just telling you to unplug the AC adapter after you're done using it. So yeah, a little warning thing there, I guess. And yeah, so we're going to unbox the Super Famicom. Hopefully there'll be a power adapter in there. So we'll just set all of this aside for now. Yeah, that's the one thing about these listings, is the only photos were the box and the console itself. They didn't, you know, take photos of the manual or the adapters. They both said that they were functional, that these were tested. So I just assumed they would have the power adapter, but you know, see, hopefully this one does. You can probably just tear this open here like we did with the Famicom. And yeah, you see we've got that same, you know, packaging style with just a piece of cardboard over the styrofoam container that houses everything. And I really, really love this artwork. This is just like the coolest thing to me. I really like it. Definitely props to Nintendo there for whoever designed the Super Famicom artwork. So yeah, we'll set that aside. And so here it is. It looks like we've got a power adapter. Check that out. Oh, that styrofoam noise, eef. And yep, this is a transformer. So you see it takes in AC 100 volt and it outputs DC 10 volt. Just for comparison here, I went ahead and grabbed my North American NES power adapter. And if you see on it, once the camera decides to focus in here, you see it takes in 120 volt and it outputs AC 9 volts. So this is actually a step-down adapter instead of an AC to DC transformer. And I just looked and it appears that the Super Famicom and the Famicom's AC transformer specifications are the same. They both output 10 volts. So we should be able to use this with the Famicom, assuming that this connector here on the back is the same, which I believe it is. But with all that out of the way, let's take a look at the controllers and the console here. So the controllers, unlike the Famicom, are the same design as the North American controllers. They're just a little bit different. They've got different colored buttons. The buttons actually are all the same in this case, whereas on the North American one, the X and Y buttons are different, like physical buttons. They're not exactly the same as the A and B buttons. So we'll set those aside. And here is the console itself. Check that out. So yeah, it definitely needs to be cleaned up. This bottom needs to be retrobrighted, so it's not in like the most amazing shape, but according to the listing, it still works, and we will confirm that here in a minute. So on the back, you've got your multi-out, RF out, DC in, and on the bottom, you've got your extender port here, which that is definitely really stuck in there. Holy cow, that's not... There we go. So there's your expansion port for things like the Satellaview, which was a Japanese-only thing that you could use with the Famicom, and you've got your model number and serial number, I assume, and all that stuff down there. Looks like right here you've got that same little info sheet to tell you to unplug it when you're done using it. And right here, you've got your AC adapter. So yeah, we are missing the instruction manual, it looks like, but you know what? I'm not going to complain, because for the price of this stuff, I mean, it was a steal. And yes, the Super Famicom definitely needs some work. I'm absolutely going to retrobright this, clean it up. That'll probably be for a different video though, because I do want to actually see if these things work. So let's go ahead and hook them up to my TV and we'll try them out. Alright, so full disclosure, it has been a little while since I recorded the last clip, and I have tested both the Famicom and the Super Famicom in that time. So I've confirmed that the Famicom works. We'll come back to the Super Famicom later. And I figured I'd just demo this thing. So we're going to pop in Tetris here momentarily, but first I'm going to connect this thing up to my TV, or rather my capture setup, with the North American NES RF adapter. Now yes, if you have one of these, you can use it with the Famicom just fine. So I'm going to flip it around to the back, and here's what it looks like with everything plugged in, and the channel switch is set to channel 2. Now the reason why I have to hook this up to my capture device is, well, first of all, I would like to get really crisp video capture from it, but also the VCR I'm using over here is the only analog video device I have in this house that I can manually tune to channel 95 and 96, which are the North American channels in the same frequency range as Japanese channels 1 and 2. The old Symphonic CRT TV that I would normally use for this kind of video cannot be set to those channels, at least least without the remote, which I don't have. So let's go ahead and flip open the cartridge cover there, and I'm going to pop in Tetris for the Famicom. And let's power it on. Let me just grab controller number 1 here. And let me manually type in channel 96 here on my VCR's remote. And we should, keyword is we should see a video signal. Okay, thanks to the Super Famicom, I was able to discover the problem. The power adapter is failing, or at least it has a bad connection, because it is plugged in and powered on right here. The light isn't on, but if I jiggle around the cable coming out of the power adapter, you see it comes on, and now it's off again. So we're going to have to take a look at this and potentially just get a new adapter entirely. But this is what I was talking about. When you jiggle this around, it makes connection properly, and then this light turns on. The original Famicom, unfortunately, doesn't have an indicator light of any kind for power, so you can't tell if the power adapter is working properly just from it. So I'm going to take a look at this, see if it's something that I can fix. If not, I'll have to get a new one. Okay, so I did take this thing apart and have a look at what was going on inside, as I suspected there was a loose connection, but I ended up just getting replacement power adapters anyways for a few reasons. I wanted to have 2 of these so I could hook both of these consoles up at the same time, and ideally I wanted to have a modern equivalent of the original power supply that was designed for use in North America. So just real quickly here, the US and Japan, although we use a similar type of electrical outlet, the voltage they provide is slightly different, with most American outlets supplying 120 volts versus Japan's 100 volts. So although this power adapter for the Famicoms can plug into one of my outlets just fine, it will be receiving more voltage than it was designed to handle. Now, plenty of people will tell you that this isn't a big deal and it's overkill because yes, the console will work, and others will say it's like the worst thing you could ever do. I personally like to use a step-down transformer to ensure that the AC adapter is getting supplied with the voltage that it expects, but if we get a power supply that's rated for 120 volt usage, we don't have to worry about this at all. So after searching the web for a bit, I found that many in the retro gaming community recommended this Triag Magnetics WSU 090-2000-R. It's got an absurdly long name, so you know it must be a power supply. I picked up 2 of these on DigiKey for around $12 each, and I'll leave that link down below. Now, these power supplies do output less voltage and more amps than the original, but it is within the tolerance of what the Famicoms can handle. So after they arrived, I plugged the original Famicom into one of them, popped in Tetris, and powered it on. And as you can see, it works! Just a quick side note here, I was extremely surprised to learn that the Famicom version of Tetris doesn't allow you to move blocks down on the screen one line at a time. You can only bring the pieces to the bottom in one go and move them left to right and rotate them, of course. I started playing Tetris on the Game Boy where this is possible and it's how I'm used to playing, so while I like to think I'm pretty good at Tetris, this made the game far more challenging. But anyways, now on to the Super Famicom. I did allude to this earlier, but unfortunately this console has a few problems, and unlike the Famicom, which is in immaculate cosmetic condition, it's also pretty dirty and the bottom half of the plastic is yellowed. So we're definitely going to have to pull out the Retrobrighting supplies, but we'll come back to that later. Now it does power on, as we saw earlier when I was testing the original power supply, so the first thing I did was hook up the new power supply and display cables, popped in that copy of Yoshi's Island, and flicked the power switch. And yeah, we just get a blank flashing screen. My first instinct was that there was a problem with the cartridge, so I reseated it a few times, which didn't change anything. Then I decided to take apart the cartridge to clean its pins with isopropyl alcohol, which also didn't change anything. So I started to suspect that the console's cartridge slot was the culprit, but I didn't have any other Japanese games that I could pop in to verify that. Fortunately, the Super Famicom is capable of playing North American SNES games. You just have to take the console apart as they won't be able to physically fit into the cartridge slot. So after getting the top plastic piece off, I popped in a known working copy of Super Mario All-Stars, flicked the power switch, and okay, so we've got the game running this time, but holy cow, is that a bad signal. Though the good news is we know that the console's cartridge slot is working just fine, so I'm gonna set that copy of Yoshi's Island aside for now because we gotta figure out this display problem. Naturally, the first thing I did was change out the AV cables, as fortunately Nintendo used the same multi-out connector on most of their home consoles all the way up to the GameCube. So I had a couple replacements lying around that I could try with this, but unfortunately that didn't change anything either. The video signal still looked scrambled. Though, notably, the audio was coming through just fine on both sets of cables. I just didn't have my capture device set up properly to pick that up, so whoops. There is good news though, we've now narrowed down the issue to something inside the console. And initially I suspected the multi-out connector itself, so just for the heck of it, I decided to hook up the RF switch that I used earlier on the original Famicom, as the Super Famicom has both connections for hooking it up to a TV. And it worked just fine, the video signal was clear as day. This confirmed that the console was outputting a video signal properly, but there was something wrong with either the multi-out connector or somewhere along the route the signal takes to get to that connector. Either way, I wanted to fully take apart this thing to take a closer look at the PCB, so I began to remove the layer of metal shielding from the top, only to discover a whole bunch of gunk around the various chips. Yeah, this looked like flux residue to me, which isn't great to have lying around on a PCB. I posted a photo of it to Twitter and some people thought it could have been corrosion, but I was able to clean it up with a toothbrush dabbed in isopropyl alcohol. I also began researching the issue I was having and came across a few Reddit threads where people suggested replacing the capacitors on the PCB. I also found a YouTube video from the Retro channel where he had a Super Famicom with a similar display issue and replaced the caps to fix it. The reasoning is that the video signal going to the multi-out port goes through a series of capacitors inside the Super Famicom, while the signal going to the RF connector does not. And we know that the video shows up just fine over RF, so that means the picture processing and video encoder chips are working. We also know that we get audio over both multi-out and RF, so unless there's something wrong with just the video pins on the multi-out connector, this seemed to be the most probable culprit. But I did clean the multi-out connector pins with isopropyl and ended up just doing the entire board as there was a bit more of that brown residue on the underside. But as I anticipated, the video signal over multi-out did not improve at all. So I placed an order for a recap kit from Console 5, who I had used a while back for another project, and waited for the parts to arrive. In the meantime, we can focus on cleaning and retrobrighting the outer shell of the console. The top portion was super easy as it just needed a good scrubbing with some cleaner and it looked pretty much good as new. The bottom portion, however, had to be blown out with some compressed air as there was a bit of dust and other gunk in some of the crevices, and given a good cleaning before we could get it ready for retrobrighting. I used some painter's tape to cover up the labels on the underside before getting some saran wrap out and covered in a layer of salon care cream. Then I put the case piece on top and applied some more cream directly to it before wrapping the saran wrap around. All that was left to do now was put it under some UV lights. The setup I have utilizes this big plastic tub set on top of a cardboard box with a clamp light inside pointing upwards and a second light pointing down from the top. This way the light gets evenly distributed to both sides of the plastic. Now whenever I'm retrobrighting something, I usually let it sit for around 12 hours and then come back and check on it to see if I need to reposition anything. And this time around I did. The interior side that I had facing up looked pretty good, but the exterior side still had a bunch of yellowing, as it was sitting essentially right on top of the UV light underneath it. In fact, you can even see the outline of the clamp light on the portion that did get de-yellowed. So all I did was flip the plastic over and let it sit for this time a little more than 12 hours. And here's how it looked when it was done. Now you can't really see it so well in this shot, but the left and right sides, while certainly better than they used to be, are still a bit yellowed. So I decided to do another coat of the salon care cream and reposition the lights to aim directly at each side. And after about a day or so, here's how it looked. By this point, the left and right sides looked pretty much as good as they were going to get from what I could tell, but the front and back still needed some work, as again, the light wasn't directly hitting either side. So I did one last coat of the cream and rotated the console 90 degrees under the light and let it sit for hours once more. By this point, the capacitors had arrived in the mail, so I shifted back to working on the PCB. I was able to find a schematic online that I used to figure out what circuit that each of these capacitors were connected to, and I determined that the issue most likely lied within this cluster of capacitors near the multi-out port, which is where the video signal passes through. Well, except for C65 and C66, which are for the audio circuitry, which we know works just fine over multi-out. However, I was going to replace every capacitor on the board regardless because I had all the parts to do it, plus it's a good practice anyways because all these caps are over 30 years old, so they were bound to fail at some point. Now, with the exception of the through-hole cap at C67, all of these are surface mount components, which are a little more difficult to remove from the PCB, as you can't just flip it over to desolder the legs from the back side. I've actually never done this before. In fact, I haven't even recapped anything before, and I can count on one hand the amount of times I've had to solder something. I have been trying to get more experience with it though, so I've been practicing on an old PC motherboard that I had lying around, and got pretty comfortable removing through-hole components, but I didn't have any surface mount ones to experiment with, so I was just gonna have to wing this. Now, there's a few ways you can go about removing surface mount capacitors from a PCB, and regardless of which method I choose, there's going to be people who say I'm doing it wrong. I spent a good few hours looking into this and seeing how other people replace these caps. In fact, that video I mentioned before from the Retro channel was a huge help and very easy to follow along with. He also goes into more detail about the different methods in which you can remove these caps, so I'll leave that up in the cards if you'd like to check it out. I ended up going the route that I saw recommended the most, and ironically, it's the method that seems the most careless at first, and that is taking a pair of pliers and ripping the caps directly off of the board, or to be more specific, breaking the top of the capacitor off of its legs. The advantage of this method is it prevents you from having to use a soldering iron on one side of the cap and lifting it up from that side, which, if you're not careful, could result in the pad on the other side ripping off the board, which isn't good. Other methods include using a hot air station or solder tweezers, but I didn't have either of those. So with a little bit of hesitation, I pulled out my pliers and started to go to work. The key is to rotate the capacitor from left to right until the top of it breaks off from its legs, and then apply some flux to get the legs off of the PCB, which I was actually able to do with just the tip of my soldering iron. Then I applied some flux and fresh solder to the pads and used a solder wick to clean it up. Finally, I rubbed the area down with a Q-tip dabbed in isopropyl alcohol to get ready and solder the new capacitors on. It only took a couple of minutes, and I was quite pleased with the results because I was definitely nervous that I was going to end up screwing up one of the pads, which would have sucked. That's not an easy thing to fix, especially for a beginner like me. Now, soldering the new caps took a bit longer. I had to readjust them several times to line them up with the pads, but the idea is to dab some solder onto the tip of your iron, hold the capacitor in place with a pair of tweezers, and solder one side of it down. Then do one side of all the other ones in the cluster because it's more efficient that way, before rotating the entire board around to do the other sides. I didn't have one of those cool microscopes or anything to get a nice close-up overhead shot of what I was doing, so yeah, this'll have to do. But I got all the new capacitors in this cluster on successfully, and instead of moving on to the other ones right away, I decided to take a break from soldering to test the console again and see if my suspicion about these particular caps was correct. So I hooked it up, popped in Super Mario All-Stars, and flicked the power switch. Yep, that was it. We've now got a clear as day signal coming over the RCA cables. Seriously, I don't know how well I can convey this in a video, but this was extremely exciting for me. Like I said, this was the first time I had ever recapped anything, and for it to be a success the first time, without having to go back and fix something, that was huge. But I wasn't done yet, as I did want to replace the other 5 capacitors, and fortunately that went smoothly as well. Afterwards, I tested the console once more to make sure I didn't break anything, and yeah, it powered up just fine again with a beautiful looking video signal. Now all that was left to do was reassemble the console, but I couldn't do that until the Retrobrighting had finished, so let's go check on that and see where it's at. By this point, the plastic had been sitting under UV light for over 24 hours, so I knew that whatever state it was in was probably the best we were going to get. And here's how it looked. There's definitely a noticeable improvement, and I was pretty satisfied with the results, and to be honest, pretty eager to get this thing put back together. So I took the painter's tape off of the 2 labels and let the plastic dry for a while, before moving back to the studio to start the reassembly. And with that, I think now's a great time for a good old-fashioned time-lapse. And here it is all put back together. So there's only one thing left to do, and that is, of course, try to play a game on this thing. But unfortunately, this copy of Yoshi's Island that I mentioned earlier, despite my best efforts, I cannot get this thing to work. I've tried cleaning the pins off some more, taking it apart, inspecting it for any sort of visual damage, and, I can't at the moment figure it out. So I'm going to have to do some more research and look into this. But yeah, as of right now, this game does not work, which was a bummer. Because, I didn't have any other Super Famicom games to demo with this thing, so I was either going to have to just run it with the top off or get one of those, like, adapters to put North American games in here. That is until I received a message from one of my friends who was visiting Japan a couple weeks ago, and he said, "Hey, I'm currently at a hard-off in Akihabara. Do you want me to grab you anything?" So, of course, I was like, yes, that would be awesome. Do they happen to have any Super Famicom games? Which, of course, the answer was, yeah, they had a bunch. So he picked up these three right here, anywhere from 500 to 800 yen each. And I just got to thank him once again because we're going to have some games to play on this thing now. So we've got this Mahjong game. We have this baseball game. This is Jikyo Super Professional Baseball 94, I believe, or something like that. This is apparently a popular baseball franchise in Japan, according to him. And we have Space Bazooka, which is actually the Japanese release of Battle Clash, which is a game published by Nintendo. Interestingly enough, this was published in North America before it hit the Japanese market, and it was just called Space Bazooka when it eventually did release in Japan. So, let's go ahead and start out with the Mahjong game. So we will go ahead and take this out of its hard-off packaging, which is really cool. I mean, I've always wanted to go to hard-off. I've never been to Japan. I know when I go there, I'm going to go to hard-off. It's like one of the first things on my list. But yeah, now I actually own some stuff that was purchased at a hard-off, which is super cool just to think about, at least for me. So before I turn this on, let me just plug in a controller, and let's see if it works. Huh. Okay. Alright, let me try to reseat it here. Maybe that's all it needs. Ah, there we go. Look at that. Alright. So, I guess we'll start here. Full disclosure, I have never played Mahjong before in my life, so I really have, no idea what I'm doing. And I also, of course, can't read any of this, so this is where the segment of the video entitled Michael Struggles with the Japanese Language begins. Because this is, yeah, this is going to be rather hilarious for people who do understand Japanese. So is this like a character selection? Alright. Oh yeah, I guess, okay, so you're picking, 4 people. Alright, he's saying something. And, okay. I don't know, I'm trying to, narrate. It's like I have no idea what's even going on. Yeah, you know what? I think we'll just leave it there. I don't want to embarrass myself too much, but, yeah, so that is the Mahjong game. We'll pop in the baseball game next. I'm actually kind of curious to see what this is all about. So we'll take it out of its packaging here. And let's see if it works. Ah yes, Konami, everybody's favorite video game company of all time. So, we'll just hit start here. There's someone speaking Japanese, and okay, we'll go to, well, I can read Versus. I guess we'll go into that mode, and okay, so we got, yeah, 1 player versus computer, 1 player versus second player, and computer on computer? Is that what that is? That's actually kind of interesting. And now we select the team. So, of course, we have all Japanese teams here. So we select one. I'm just going to pick one of these at random for me and one for the computer. And, okay, I guess we'll confirm that. And now we select a stadium. Okay. So, which one looks cool just from the artwork? Let's go with this one. Why not? And, oh gosh, what do we got here? Is this like the roster? Yeah, this does look like a roster. I pulled out Google Translate on my phone. Unfortunately, it's not really able to translate this text over here. I'm guessing because it's not like regular looking text like we have over here, with the roster. So, we're just gonna hit OK. And this is the computer's roster. So, okay, I guess you could have made changes to that if you want. And here we are. So... Oh, so we got a commentator. Okay. That's what the bottom text was saying. So... Oh. 2 balls. Alright. We walked to first. My gosh, what kind of... That is a curveball if I've ever seen one. Okay. Oh, I wasn't hitting the whole time. Now I'm hitting. This apparently wasn't hitting. Yeah, now I'm out. Okay. Well, I certainly have not played this game before. It probably shows. But yeah, so we are 2 for 2 so far. Let's go ahead and pop in the third game here, Space Bazooka, and see if this one works, and we'll play it for a little bit as well. So, yeah, it looks like we might need to do some cleaning and some retrobrighting. I mean, that's pretty much on all of these. I mean, what do you expect? These are rather old cartridges. And yeah, we might need to reseat this here. Let's go ahead and try that. The pins on this thing do look like they might need some cleaning. There we go. Look at that. Oh, we need a light gun for this, which I don't have, nor do I have this hooked up to a CRT, so even if I did, it wouldn't be able to work with this. But, yeah, the game works, and I guess we can just let it play through its demo here. So yeah, we are 3 for 3. I mean, that's awesome. I'm super happy about that. I mean, I know I just said we can leave it on, but we can turn it off while I'm trying to do the outro here. So yeah, I mean, I'm pretty happy with this repair. I'm just glad I was able to get this console working, cleaned up. It still is a bummer about this copy of Yoshi's Island, but why don't we just try it one more time here for good measure. And yeah, we still got nothing. So I do need to look into this because I would love to get this copy of Yoshi's Island working. But, I mean, I've got 3 working Super Famicom games now, which is super awesome. And yeah, I mean, this video was a success. We got this thing cleaned and repaired and working again. And I'm just really happy with it. Like I said, this was kind of my first time replacing capacitors on anything. So it was neat just to, you know, experience this, see how it's done, do it myself, and do it right the first time. So I honestly couldn't be happier. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, get subscribed, all that good stuff. And if you really enjoyed this one and want to get early access to my future videos, I do have a Patreon down below you can check out, or you can become a channel member by hitting that join button. But either way, I just want to thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.